everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today I'm going to show you how to retract a rear disc brake caliper. Now, I'm going to assume the reason you clicked on this video is because you are dealing with the first type I'm showing, which is a ratcheting type emergency brake system. And they're not as common as the second type, but they are sure as heck a pain in the neck. I'll show that type first, and then the more conventional, just regular piston with a C-clamp second. The second way is much easier, and it is much more common, but I'm pretty sure if you're clicking on this video, you have the first type. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, before we get started, I want to go ahead and point out that I have our caliper here zip tied to a little piece of the bodywork, a little inner fender there, and it's pretty darn secure. You want to make sure that you're not hanging the caliper by any kind of brake line, so all the tension for it is actually on these zip ties. Just want to go over that before we jump in. So the first type of caliper retraction I want to go over is this Ratcheting Ebrake system. Now, this uses a little ratchet inside with a spring on the back side, so every time you push the brakes, it ratchets itself out a little more each time you push it. That way your e-brake always functions. It's a little bit weird, but it does work. And the way you can tell you have that is either by looking at the back or very easily looking at the piston surface for the caliper. You see these two little divots here and here. Those are actually a great indicator that you have this type, and I'm going over it first because I'm reasoning the reason you clicked on this video is because you're stuck at this part, and if you put any kind of force on this with like a regular C-clamp or channel locks like you would do, I don't know, any other brake, it would just retract back in and you'd be all good to go. But this one, you actually need a little special tool, so let's go over that. Okay, so here is the special tool you need. Mine is made by Blue Point. It is a universal brake caliper tool. There's a part number if you're really curious and want to look that up. But I understand if you don't own one of these. However, every AutoZone I've ever been to, or I even think Napa, rents this for either free or very cheap, or just a deposit. So this is a tool that is available to you. It's not impossible to find. Just ask around at your local auto parts store and I'm sure they will help you out. So it has a set of little collets that go inside those timers and ratchet the piston back into the caliper. And you can look here on the applications where it says, you know, Fords and Dodges. Today we're working on a Dodge, so number 1 is what we're looking for. And keep in mind that this is just a general guide up here on the sticker. For you, you can just test fit them, put them on there and see if it fits, but this looks correct and the sticker says it's correct, so we're gonna go with that. And the way this works, this is actually the tool itself, is this goes on the caliper and you hold this outside nut with a big wrench, and then with another wrench or a socket, this winds back into the caliper, so we can go ahead and hold this and reset it back to a little bit lower. That way we can get it inside the caliper. So we're going to go ahead and put it on like this, onto this chuck there, and then we can install this on the brake caliper and wind that piston back into the caliper. So let's go take a look. So before I install it, I'm going to go ahead and test fit to make sure that timer matches up in there. And it does not, so I actually need a little bit bigger size. There we go, that's better. So, like I said earlier, the sticker on the box is more of a guide. You want to make sure that you test fit it before you put this on in order to make sure you're getting a proper fit. So what we can do is make sure that this cut piece is toward the back of the caliper and the straight piece is towards the front, or maybe the bottom you'd call it. So we can go ahead and slip that in and wind that up so that way the pegs fit in those timers we talked about earlier. What we can do is go ahead and get this into position and making sure that the tool is flush with the piston surface like this one is. And now we are ready to wrench on it. The outside nut here is 1.25 inches on this particular tool. It might be different on yours. You might have to do some trial and error. Or you can use a pair of channel locks, but it's easier to use a big wrench if you have it ready. And then on mine, because this tool's a little dated, everything on it's American. The modern ones are probably all metric, but this one's American. And we can go ahead. Now as we hold the outside nut with our wrench and tighten the tool with our ratchet, and sometimes they're a little stuck, we can see that the piston is retracting back into the caliper while winding itself back in, which is what you want in this situation. And sometimes it's more about consistency of force and less about just rocket shipping it back into its home. And then in this situation, the tool has gotten a little loose. It's actually kind of falling off the caliper here, so we have to readjust it. If your tool gets loose like this, just wind the outside nut out a little bit. Make sure the pegs are still in the timer divots on the piston. And wind this back in so it's nice and tight once again. And then once it's at the end of its travel, the piston housing and the piston will be flush with each other and it will not go in any further. Don't try to push it beyond its means. And then we can loosen our tool here to check that it is in fact flush, which it is. The boot's a little jagged and throwing us off, but it's pretty flush, so we are good to go. And that is how that type of piston is retracted into the caliper. So now we're gonna go ahead and move on to the one that's a little more common and on most vehicles. So on the rear brakes here, I have the caliper flipped up. It's a little bit interesting mechanism there. And I have a C-clamp. We're gonna set the brake pad in while we tighten our C-clamp here. And that's gonna push the piston back into its housing. And then once it's fully recessed, just stop and check. And you can verify that because the piston will be fully into the housing. You'll be able to kind of lay your finger across and you won't feel that the piston is coming up anymore. So it's ready for a new braking surface. So this way is a little bit easier. This way is the conventional way. Most makes and models use this type of system. Very few use that ratcheting system I showed earlier, but it's important to know both. So that's how to retract a rear brake caliper. No matter what make and model you have, you either have the first type or the second type. Very few models don't have either of those. A couple weird little oddballs here and there, but I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb here and say that covers 99.9% of vehicles with rear disc brakes. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.